Welcome, Piyush, and I am catching you on a long holiday weekend. So it's my pleasure, and I don't know whether I'm earning your displeasure on this, but I thought maybe uh, since I've been going back and forth with folks and trying to get their honest opinions on Ayurkula, it would be a good time to speak to you because obviously we've really interacted a lot at Ayurkula, and sort of you have a unique perspective in the way I would see it is that you have sort of attended the Ayurkula's global outreach sessions, large many of them. And you've also sort of been, you've also attended a directed workshop, and you've also been a member, and sort of you've been involved in the weeds, if you may say so. So I think you will bring a very unique, you've seen it from inside and from all the angles. And so I would just say, like, what is it that brought you to the Ayurkula journey? That should be. I would love to hear that.
First of all, always a pleasure to catch up with you. Never a dull moment, always animated conversations around important topics. So, Rajat, if anybody looks at the last uh, year and a half or so, if they are not able to deduce that the biggest takeaway is mental and physical wellness, then people are kidding themselves. So, whilst I've been at the verge of pulling the trigger in terms of mental and physical well-being best practices, this whole pandemic really sort of propelled me to take some actions. So, and that's why your classes, your global sessions came in at a very, very opportune moment. And then post that, when you had this dedicated program, I thought, how do I take things to next level? After having understood the basics, I thought, hey, now let's try do a few things. And therefore the individuals, the sessions that you conducted came in very handy. And as you know, I've been able to effect a few changes, and the journey has started. Miles to go, but the journey has started.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, so since change doesn't happen overnight, and that's we are sort of without trying to discourage folks, it's admission of sheer fact. I think maybe it would be also interesting to hear as to, because always sometimes one picks up one thing or another and takes that small baby step as to, like, where were you, because it's always conditioned to each person's unique circumstances. So, like, where were you able to start that nudging on the edges, if one may say so.
Right. So, look, once I understood the science behind certain things, that sort of really made me take some actions. So, for example, your consistent rant around monoculture carbohydrates, and how highly ultra processed carbohydrates are so counterproductive for the body. It sort of really made sense if when I understood the science behind it. And also I try to correlate with what I had seen growing up back home in India. So it all made sense, ancient wisdom and science coming together. And that's when, like I had shared with you, I started making some small fundamental changes to some basics. So, for example, no more ultra processed atta or flour, um, the right kind of ghee, using cane sugar and not the usual processed sugar. So that's how I've been able to sort of start the journey.
Right. And
Again, baby
obviously,
steps.
yeah, and I
Sorry.
think it's like you said at the get-go, and sometimes we do all the good things, but it's just the stress of the life, and it's the mind and the body and everything else. And since we cannot determine it precisely what is that will click it, but if you do a host of things together over a period of time, then things start happening. And uh, I think that sort of also behooves the question as to, what does it take for somebody to bring about change? Because I know And that's something that I always feedback on. And this is a struggle for Ayurkula as well, as to, like, this was an unfortunate situation where people were forced indoors. And now, with will people forget, will the memory be short, or like how do you make a person consistently walking that journey, and who would be the kind of people who would be sort of an ideal fit? I mean, one could argue either way on that, right?
So I'd say that the first step is to measure the baseline. So what you can't measure, you can't improve. So um, when I had my physical and I looked at my results, of course, they weren't favorable. So that prompted me to, and then that coincided with your session. So that prompted me to start taking actions. So that's, I think, important for people to just measure their baselines, and then look at and define what their North Star is, to be honest. Um, so that everybody should do. And in terms of the kind of people, Rajat, I don't think there is I mean, this is restricted to anybody. If I had my way, I'd sit down my 14-year-old daughter, and have her follow some of these practices. Why having ultra processed carbohydrate is not beneficial for her? If she gets it right now, maybe she'll have lesser problems. So it's not a typical archetype that one should follow. It's for one and all. I mean, simple things, like taking deep breaths when very, very anxious. I see her getting really anxious at times. Typical teenage issues, right? Dealing with too much of homework at one point of time. So if she starts deep breathing, etc., she'll benefit. So there's no one archetype, Rajat. I think this is for one and all.
Yeah, and
And in fact, I saw in your session there's some really um, old people as well as really young people.
right.
So
Yeah. Yeah, we had folks from teachers, young, just out of school teachers from Alabama. There were people from Colorado. There were people from Singapore. And I think, to your point that you made earlier, also, I don't know whether maybe you've seen it or not. So besides, because obviously, this measuring thing is also like, once, of course, the body always speaks to us, and then sort of we ignore it. But sometimes, given to how our minds are conditioned, when we see something written in paper, and there's a scale, and the doctor tells us, well, this is not looking good. Some folks are sort of play complacent enough to, okay, you know what, I have the statin and I have this, and then again I go my way until the thing gets bumped up, and then it's almost from going from a chronic to an acute situation, as opposed to that, where there is a pause and we see, well, things are not absolutely right at all, and it's one could see it even without numbers, but then the numbers are speaking. And then you start tracking it. And you spoke about your daughter and the demographics. I think, and I've heard this from a few people, where what you do is not impacting just your health, but it is almost like a peer influence on the people around you. And if enough peers are influencing, youngsters in the right way, and each other, then I think, I would hope, that's the hope that we have, that there is enough, good feedback loops, because wrong feedback is easier available than that, right?
and so in the spirit of sharing um, the changes I've been doing, I talked to you about some of the food ingredients, some of the basics that one is changing. The one very recent thing I've started doing is measuring my sleeping patterns. So if you recall, before we had our sleep session, you'd asked us to sort of fill a questionnaire around sleeping habits, patterns, etc., etc. And I was thinking to myself that I sleep pretty well. I get a good 7 hours of sleep. I'm decent, and it's pretty uninterrupted sleep. But for the last few weeks, I've been tracking my sleeping patterns, and it sounds like while I'm in the bed for like 6 hours, I'm actually getting 5.25 kind of hours on an average, which is not enough and not sufficient.
Right.
So measuring measuring it and hopefully
Right, and I
doing
think we can
something.
discuss this at length. Actually, this is a favorite area of mine, mind meditation. It goes very exotic, and it's just even the next layers would involve not only the amount of sleep when you're not awake, but the makeup of the sleep. And you'll find that when you start spending enough chunk of your sleep in deep sleep, that is the time which really determines how well you get up in the morning. Said, well, I feel good, and I, have this on my hand and I keep tracking it also. And it clearly shows up. Sometimes we have become digital nomads. We look at the thing and we then can correlate with what happened and acts as like, a tap on the shoulder as to, just the sleep and whatever. But clearly, yeah, and the subtle part, which always sort of ends up being very influential, the elephant in the room where, most of us tend to ignore and stuff. But I think your insights are great, and we absolutely look forward to you, as I would call you, one of the founder members at Ayurkula, to
Early adopters.
to be the force, to be the spokesperson, and to get this off the ground. And it's,
Happy to.
yeah, it's just lovely to have you on the platform, and your honest, from the gut feedback, because that is what keeps us honest, all of us, and doing the right thing.
So the
Yeah.
idea, like we've discussed in the past, is to spread the word about wellness, especially amongst the diaspora that we have out here. Because of various factors, life in the fast lane, we end up choosing convenient routes, but they are not necessarily helping us. They may help us in the moment, but not in the long run. Some food habits, etc., because we are always rushing. But it's, I guess, time to take a step back and change some fundamental things. Serve something better when we host some of our friends and spread the word.
Yeah, yeah, I really hope that something beautiful comes out of it, and it'll be a joy for everybody. I'm sure it'll be a celebratory moment, but it's a process, it's a path, and the journey itself is as exciting as trying to think at the end where you, I mean, an end is a relative thing, right? So, but with that, I won't hold you for a much longer. You enjoy the rest of your day, and it was a pleasure having you, and we look
Al-
forward to more such conversations with you. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.